Now we're going to go in depth talking about the Individual Artist Commission. If you are coming to this video first, please go back and look at the overview video for the Statewide Community Regrant program as a whole, because there's information that applies to the Individual Artist Commission in that video. So the Individual Artist Commission supports the creation of new work by an artist, and the project must engage a segment of the community through a small-scale public presentation of the work or community involvement during the creative process of the artist project. Presentations and community involvement may be done in person or virtually, and grant awards are determined by a peer review panel made up of artists. The grant amount is $2,500, and now we're going to go in depth talking about all what we've summarized here, and start off with some examples of previously successful grant applications and projects. So Brad Scher got funding from us for his Dragon Circus project, where he created a series of large-scale dragon puppets and brought them out to various events in the city of Poughkeepsie to get people to engage and have more exposure to puppetry and artists. And I think it's a great example. What this program is really trying to achieve is, first of all, get artists paid for creating their work, have some exposure to and then the other side of that is that it's shared with the public in some way, either through a public presentation or by involving community members during the creation of work, so that the public gains an understanding of the important role that an artist plays in our community. So it's kind of like we have an overall educational goal. Arts Mid-Hudson does, and NISCA does through this program, to really expose the public to what artists do in their practice. Some other examples: Crystal Yang got funding for Neo-Hudson River painting, where she worked on a series of paintings which were inspired by the Hudson River School painters, but in exploring traditional Chinese painting methods. And these, she worked on these on her own and then presented them to the public in a final presentation. Hudson River of Bricks. This was a project by Julia Whitney Barnes several years ago, where she gathered bricks that were made along the Hudson River, and worked with a lot of brick makers, families of brick makers, and really went into the history of this industry in our region, and then created a large-scale installation of the bricks that she collected in the shape of the Hudson River. And she also glazed a lot of the bricks. She's a ceramic artist, so there was a lot of elements to this. It really checked everything, where it had involvement during the creative process and a public presentation at the end. You don't have to do that, but this artist did do that. From Brick Street to the Grave, Jovan O'Neill. This was a poetry project that Jovan did in Newburgh, where he wrote a series of poems. And then for his final presentation, he did a reading at the Newburgh Library and a poetry workshop. So this really, the final presentation was really the workshop. It was very successful, really a great way to engage the public in the work and fulfill all the requirements of the grant. Jing Shui got funding for Fan Your Talents, where she created a series of painted fans, choreographed a traditional Chinese fan dance, and then worked with community members for them to paint their own fans and do their own presentation, and then did a final presentation at the end. Roberto Juan Rodriguez did a great program where he worked with youth to co-compose percussion pieces that incorporated his focus, which is on Afro-Cuban percussion, and their musical interests to create a co-collaborative piece together. And then they all presented them together in a final presentation. So the overall goals of the Individual Artist Commission are to support Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster County artists in the creation of new work, to support underrepresented artists in our region, including Black, Latino, Indigenous, Asian, people of color, LGBTQIA, and disabled artists. All artists are encouraged to apply. And as I said before, to highlight the vital role that artists play within a community. Eligibility. So we went over this in the previous video, but I'll just talk about it again here. Artists apply directly to the Individual Artist Commission and may submit one grant proposal to this funding opportunity. You must be at least 18 years of age at the time of submission, a resident of Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster counties in New York State, may not be enrolled in a full-time degree program. Artist collectives, groups, and artist collaborations are not eligible. It must be one artist applying. Projects must be independent work initiated by the artist. We talked about that in the last video. And artists who received this commission previously may apply again if their commission took place in 2022 or earlier. So those that received in 2023 are not eligible this year. Community, so a note about some projects that are ineligible. Community art grant applicants may not apply to the individual artist commission for artist fees. You can just apply for those artist fees through the community arts grant. And please see the guidelines for the complete list of ineligible projects. Everything that I'm going to say in this video and more is in the guidelines for this program. Allowable expenses. So these are the types of expenses that these funds can fund. And I'll say in general, we can fund anything that's listed here and anything, and then anything that's not explicitly listed as something we cannot fund. So if you have a question about an expense and you don't see it listed here and you don't see it addressed in non-eligible expenses or ineligible expenses, then reach out to us if you'd like a confirmation. Artist fees for the individual artist. We get this question a lot. You are totally encouraged to take an artist fee for your time to create the work. And I say encourage. That I think that actually strengthens the proposal and makes it more feasible because the artist is getting some compensation for their work. Inevitably, a lot of artists, depending on your medium, may, especially if you need to purchase materials, this may vary. I recommend to artists to think about looking at what are your hard, definite expenses that you need to execute the project, and then carving out as much as you can for yourself as an artist fee. And then also thinking, these are the expenses I need to do the project, and that leaves nothing for me for an artist fee. Does that mean you should maybe evaluate the scope of what you're doing and balance to try to reduce expenses somewhere else so that you can pay yourself an artist fee? Other allowable expenses, community outreach, advertising, or marketing efforts. These should really be a minimal expense because the main focus of this is to create the new work. But if you need to carve out a little bit of funding to promote a final event or to print out some flyers to try to get community involvement, that's totally fine. Efforts to increase accessibility to arts programming. So that might be, that you're going to hire somebody to translate some text for you, or you're going to have some special accessibility accommodations present at an event that you need to spend a little bit of money on. That would be fine. Supplies and materials needed to execute the proposed project, such as art supplies, hardware, memory cards, or other consumable equipment. And we can also fund equipment purchase, software, subscriptions, and training needed to execute the proposed project. And when we say training, we mean training on the equipment, software, or subscriptions. If you're proposing that you're going to do a project in a medium, you should not be seeking, it's not going to be competitive if you're also seeking training on a core aspect of that. Meaning you want to do a painting project, and so you're going to ask for funding to do painting workshops. That's just not going to be competitive. But if you are going to be using a new tool and you need to get a little training on that, that would be fine. Individual items may not exceed $1,000 for equipment purchase. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the public component for the individual artist commission. So as I said before, there are really two options for the public component: public presentation, and the next one you'll see is involvement during the creative process. We'll talk about public presentation first. So this presentation must be open to the public and can be in person or virtual. So that could mean that you're going to show your work online, or you're going to have a virtual presentation. That would be allowable as well. Or you're going to have the work in person and do a public presentation. In person, and it's up to the panel to determine what they think is most competitive and appropriate for the project. In-person presentations must take place in the county's, in the artist county of residence, and artists may charge an admission fee for public presentations. That's perfectly fine. They just should not be overwhelming barrier for participation. If you want to talk about that, please let me know, but it really is different dependent on different mediums and who's involved. That being said, I think, yeah, let's talk about this here. I do not, we do not recommend large scale final presentations. This is again focused on the creation of the work. So you might do a stage reading. You might, I wouldn't recommend a large amount of money for framing, for example. It really is about creating the work and then coming up with a low cost way to fulfill the public component that is in line with your goals of what you want to achieve as an artist and with this project. But it's a small grant, it's $2,500, and the majority should really be going towards creating the work. As we've said many times across these videos so far, Arts Mid-Hudson strives towards broad inclusion and true access to arts and cultural programming for all. We encourage thoughtful outreach to many groups in our region and specific outreach efforts to underserved audiences. These are groups who may have limited access to arts programs, services, or resources due to location, race, economic status, gender identity, or sexual orientation, age, religion, disability, or other factors. And so, as I said in the first video, when you're doing your presentation, think about ways that you can make your presentation inclusive, expand who your audience is that is following your work, and if there are any expenses that you can take on in the budget through the funds that would allow you to broad inclusion. Involvement during the creative process. So this is the second option, and again, you do not need to do both. You're really just picking one or the other. Artists may work with a specific community during the creative process, and this would mean directly interacting with the community members during the creation of the work. And this might look like involving community members via workshops or as performers in the artist's creative work, or having the group you're working with create parallel work that will then all be shown, would exist together or would in theory be shown together. Could involve inclusion of interviews with a segment of community or stories, anecdotes that's collected from that community group and then is displayed or informs the content of the work you're creating. If you're thinking of going this route, this is another great thing for us to brainstorm together. So I encourage you to make an appointment. And just like with presentation, community involvement may be done virtually. Okay, submitting a grant proposal for the Individual Artists Commission. They are due on Thursday, February 15th, 2024 at 11:59 p.m., just before it becomes the 16th. And you can look at our application on our website. In the community, in the community arts grant in-depth video, I've shown a key area of the budget that is very similar. It's a key area of the application, the budget, which is very similar across all three applications. So if you want a little bit of extra information about the budget, please take a look at that video. You'll see a timestamp in the description below to go directly to where I talk about the budget. And this would be, if you want to talk in depth about the Individual Artists Commission application, please come to a Q&A session. We'll pull it up and look at it together. If you require any assistance in completing the online submission form, please contact us in advance of the deadline. Attachments that you'll need to attach to the application: proof of residence, dated 2023 or earlier. So if your driver's license is 22, please find a utility bill or other document that's dated 23 or earlier. The budget is embedded on the application form. I'm sorry, this shouldn't be here. It's embedded on the application form itself. You'll include your primary artist, the artist's resume or bio. It's your choice if you'd like to provide a resume or a bio. Some people have a resume that has a little short bio up at the top. That's fine. Work samples. We strongly encourage you to submit work samples. You can see the guidelines for specific detail, and it's up to 10 files. And I should amend that to say, for this category, you're required to submit work samples, and they should really be relevant to the work that you are submitting. So if you're proposing new work that you're going to create, then you might think about providing work samples that are relevant in medium or thematically or content to the work that you will be creating. And then any additional documents you'd like to submit, such as letters of support, press articles, marketing samples, or anything else like that, and you can submit up to 3 additional documents. Some quick tips about the budget. I recommend working on the narrative and the budget together to check for consistency, as we talked about in the first video. So that means, I actually recommend doing the budget first, because that can provide a really great guide to the rest of the writing in the application, and making sure that the narrative writing is supporting your budget expenses down below. Use the explanation column on the budget. This is very important to explain what a number or line item means and how that breaks down. You'll see an example of that in the community arts grant video where we talk about budget. Check the guidelines for allowable and ineligible expenses to make sure there's nothing that's appearing on your budget that we are not able to fund. And you can, I really recommend double checking that list before you submit your application. Make sure grant request is equal to $2,500, and just double check that on the budget that you're not exceeding that amount. And anytime, please ask us to review a draft of your budget and give you feedback. The review criteria for the individual artist commission is first, artistic merit, which is the artistic merit of the work samples provided and of the project that's going to be undertaken by the artist. Project feasibility, does the budget make sense? Timeline make sense? Does the artist show that they're likely to be able to complete the project in the way that it's described? And then the impact of the project on the artist's career and on the audience that will engage with it. You'll see detailed more description for each of these review criteria in the guidelines, so please take a look at that. And know that this review criteria is what the panel will literally use to score the projects when they're reviewing. So you're looking to score as highly as possible in each of these areas, and so that you're more likely to receive funding. And then, anytime you can address one or more of the goals that are listed for funding, please, you can do so, directly reference the guidelines. Recommended first steps for getting started. I recommend looking at the online application form and guidelines right away so you're familiar with what you're going to be asked to provide. Complete the project eligibility form, which you can find a link to on our website so you can get some additional feedback on the eligibility of your project. Organize digital copies of all required attachments. I recommend doing this early on so that you're not scrambling at the last minute to upload to get your proof of residency or whatever it might be. And anytime, please make an appointment with us. We're happy to talk to you about your ideas. And this will conclude the Individual Artist Commission in-depth description. If you have any additional questions, make an appointment or please attend a Q&A session.